Rev up your engines!
Well, Honda is recalling 1.2 million vehicles, Odyssey pilots, and passports. 2018 to 2023, if you think yours is covered, and you've moved, they only have to send the recall to your original address. If you moved, you'll probably never get it. You can go to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.gov website, and you can pipe in your VIN, see if it is. Problem is, the rear view camera screen goes blank. It doesn't work. By law, they got to have them, right? You still got a mirror, right? It's not like you don't have a mirror, right? But they don't work, so now they got to go through this because the stupid backup system doesn't work. And let me tell you something. Those backup cameras on a lot of cars, they are crap. I've tried out a bunch of aftermarket ones. They're almost all crap. I put them on people's cars 2 months later, 3 months later, they break. Cheap Chinese-made crap. Honda obviously screwed up on these things. Now they got to fix 1.2 million of these things because they didn't make the camera systems right. There's nothing wrong with mirrors. They work perfectly fine, right? Machines aren't going to save us from ourselves. They got to fix it for free. It'll be a headache. They'll probably have a lineup waiting for hours and hours and hours, all because they didn't build it right in the first place. And I see a lot of these backup systems are like that. They don't last long. They break. Or they start to pixelate. I mean, they make the things too cheap. Denmark54 says, my coolant is not returning to the recovery tank. I got a Dodge Grand Caravan 2009, changed the water pump, radiator thermostat, but the coolant does not suck back into the radiator. It goes into the overflow and it doesn't get sucked back in. That means you still have a problem in a cooling system. It's made so that when it gets hot, extra coolant, as it expands, water gets hot, it expands some, goes into the overflow tank, and then when you're done, it's sucked back in, right? Try this first. Get another radiator cap. If the radiator cap isn't right and sealing, guess what? Then you're not having a vacuum and it won't suck it back in. Could be as simple as all you need is a radiator cap. Now, it could also be if the radiator was made incorrectly and the cap doesn't fit right, it's not going to be sealed either because it's got to have a tight seal because the seal, when it gets high pressure, it's got to open the cap pressure, put it in the coolant. Then, when it cools down, it sucks it back into the radiator. And if that cap isn't sealed, there's no pressure to suck it in. Instead of sucking it from the overflow, if the cap doesn't work right, it'll just sit there and you have atmospheric pressure and there's no suction then and it won't suck it back in. Probably it's just the radiator cap. A lot of times it is. But if it is, it means you got a problem and the pressure is retained in the cooling system. You could have a blown head gasket. So do my video, how to tell if your head gasket's blown. Scotty. Watch it on YouTube, and you might find out your head gasket's blown, because if it is, it'll never suck it back in because the gasket's blown, it's pushing out, and it will just never suck it back in until you replace the head gasket. And it is a Dodge Caravan, which are notorious for blowing head gaskets. Red077 says, I got a question about tire shine. Do products like tire shine or tire wet make tires prematurely crack or wear out? Are they bad for your tires? Well, most of them are kind of silicone-based. They're not bad for your tires, but it's just to look shiny. It's a crow thing. The crow sees a shiny object and it likes it, right? And people are kind of like crows. The thing is, I never advise using it for one big reason. Most tires are radial tires. They're kind of squash, there's treads around, right? If you get that shine on the tread, most of it's silicone-based, your tires will slip when you slam on the brakes, you'll lose traction, and never, ever put tire shine on a motorcycle tire, because motorcycles lean, and you're leaning on the edge of the tire. I was stupid and young once, and I did it. I almost killed myself. I was doing a corner and it started sliding out on me. Never, ever do it on a motorcycle or a bicycle. Oh, look, it makes my bicycle tires look shiny. Yeah, and then they're going to slide all over the place. You're going to fall off, right? So, no, it's a show thing. It doesn't hurt the tire itself, but it might kill you if you get it on a tread and it starts sliding around when you're taking corners, you're slamming on the brakes. You want the bare rubber to be touching the road, not some kind of crazy, shiny silicone wax. Jujube said, my Trans Am won't go over 1,500 RPMs. It runs fine, but when it gets to 15, it won't run any fast. Hell, you won't go over 1,500 RPMs. There's two main things that do that. Numero uno, if your catalytic converter is starting to get clogged up, it can't breathe out. When I was a kid, kids used to put potatoes in exhaust pipes, and that would jam them up, and then they wouldn't go fast, and people would wonder, what's happening? Why won't my car go? Well, the catalytic converter, if it's clogged up inside with burnt carbon, it'd be like sticking potato. You can pressure test them, you take out the oxygen sensor, and then you measure the pressure with the gauge. Should have hardly any back pressure at all, maybe half a pound, 1 pound. If it's got 8 8, 9, 10 pounds back pressure, it means your catalytic converter's clogged up. You got to replace it, right? The other thing is either a clogged fuel filter or a bad fuel pump. If the pump can't pump enough fuel, it'll go to so many RPMs and not any further. Now, you try the cheap fix first. If the filter's clogged, do the same thing. Change the filter. Fall out. What a cheap fix. You can thank me if that fixes it, right? But if you change the filter and still does it, you can pressure test the fuel pump. And if the pressure's low, that's why it's not going. It can't pump enough fuel to get you to go that fast. Now, the only other thing that'll really do it is if your transmission's going out. If it's an automatic transmission, that's pretty easy to check, because in that case, put it in neutral. Put it in neutral. You rev it up and it revs 3,000-4,000 RPMs, but you put it in gear and it won't. Your transmission shot and it won't go past that, and you're going to need a tranny job. Hunter Johnson says, how does the Pontiac Vibe stack up to the Toyota Matrix? Okay, well, the Vibe, they were made in California in that same factory where Elon, he bought it, makes Teslas now, right? And the problem was their quality control at that GM factory was kind of crappy. Now, generally, a Pontiac Vibe is almost exactly the same as a Toyota Matrix. It's got the Toyota Corolla engine, transmission, brakes, all that. Now, usually they had AC Delco alternators on the Pontiac Vibes, and they had Nip and Denso in the Toyota Matrixes. But they were relatively similar cars. But the guys putting them together in California did a crappier job than the Japanese did. So I would much rather get a Matrix than a Vibe. But if you get a Vibe cheap, they're still decent vehicles. They weren't terrible. But they were put together by a bunch of clowns, which is one of the reasons they ended up shutting that factory down. They had such problem with their labor and quality control. The Matrix would be an overall better deal. Software Pro says, is it worth it to fix a Kia Sorento 2006 for $3,000 if it has 200,000 miles? I would not throw any money into that car. I'd put the $3,000 down on a Toyota, or I would get an older Toyota Corolla or a Honda Civic. I can get used cars for that price. The prices are starting to come down. I would not put that money into that pile of junk. 200,000 miles on it, everything's going to break on it. Let's say you're fixing the engine, then the transmission will break. Or let's say you're fixing the transmission, then the engine will break later. Don't create an endless money pit with a Kia, because they all turn into endless money pits with that kind of mileage on them. Aldo Delgado says, I got an old 3 Ford F-150. It won't shift into gear after the clutch was replaced, only when the car is running. So you got it turned off, it'll go in gear. Yeah, because the engine's not running, right? Well, and then you run the engine, you can't get into gear. Okay, you got one of two problems. Either the clutch master cylinder or the clutch save cylinder is bad, and when you step on it, it is not pushing the clutch, so it's disengaged so you can put it in gear, or they screwed up the clutch replacement job. I have seen people put the clutch disc in backwards. They will go in backwards. The tall side's supposed to face towards you, away from the engine. You can actually put it in the other way with the tall side facing front, but then it won't work right. I've seen guys do that. Either pray it's just the master or slave cylinder, because that's an easier job to fix. You don't have to pull the whole transmission off, right? But if it is inside, they put the clutch plate on backwards, or they use wrong parts, who knows? Even one time I did a Honda, put it together, it didn't work. So I take it all apart, and I take it to the auto parts store. I said, you idiots, you sold me the wrong clutch. And the guy says, oh, I transfixed the number. It was supposed to be 316 instead of 613. And he'd sold me the wrong clutch kit for the Honda, and I had to put it all back together again, and that's what the problem was. Tommy F. says, Scotty, I got a 2000 Chevy Malibu from a relative. It has 78,000 miles. Any issues I should look out for? Okay. Change the oil religiously. I would change the oil every 3,000 miles in one of those, right? They also have weak automatic transmissions, so baby the transmission. Don't jackrabbit start it, especially if it's got a V6 engine. It'll have a lot of power, and it will burn out the transmission. It is a 23-year-old car now, and even though it's only got 78,000 miles, all those parts are 23 years old. You don't want to stress the transmission. I had a guy buy one of those. 6 months later, brings it in, the car's falling apart. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, I drive it hard. I said, what do you mean? He said, I drive it 120 miles an hour on the highway. I don't care. He lived out in the desert. I said, you destroyed it. You can't buy an old car and drive it as fast as it goes, or it will fall apart, especially the American cars. They will fall apart faster when they're older than, say, a Japanese car. John Zalator says, what's your idea on the best small, medium SUV, either new or 1 to 2 years old? I would say the all-round best one, if money is no object, is a Toyota RAV4. I just rented one when we went to Death Valley. It got 50-something miles a gallon on the highway, had an 8-speed automatic, was all-wheel drive. It was a phenomenal vehicle, right? Great car, if you don't mind that money. And the Honda, their CR-Vs, pretty much similar to that, right? But if price is a big option, some of those Mazdas and some of those Subarus, they're decent little runaround SUVs if you like a smaller one. But if you want a regular one like RAV4 or even bigger, personally I stick to the Toyotas and Hondas when it came to those. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.